General Hospital spoilers reveal that Willow's transformation has reached a critical and dangerous threshold, marking one of the most disturbing psychological adjustments ever seen in Port Charles. What once seemed like quiet vulnerability has become a spiraling obsession wrapped in paranoia, fear, and emotional instability. The girl who once fought valiantly for her child, who battled illness with grace and held on to hope amid heartbreak, is no longer recognizable. What has emerged in her place is a version of Willow shaped entirely by unresolved trauma, suppressed guilt, and mounting desperation. She is no longer simply struggling, she is unraveling. The most terrifying evidence of this change comes not through tears or silence, but through violence. In a moment of pure, unfiltered panic, Willow lashes out and attacks Drew. The incident is not premeditated. It is raw, primal. The lead-up to the attack was slow and psychological, built on weeks of quiet glances, erratic behavior, sleepless nights, and suppressed rage. Willow has been carrying too much for too long, secrets about Daisy, the trauma of her past with Shiloh and Harmony. The emotional isolation she feels even when surrounded by people who claim to love her. The pressure of trying to be a perfect mother, a forgiving daughter. And she's seen him inch closer to truths she's fought to keep buried. She knows he suspects her role in the chaos surrounding Daisy, and she can feel him closing in. Instead of confronting it with logic or clarity, Willow is now operating on survival instinct. In her mind, Drew isn't just a threat to her secret, he's a threat to her child, her future, and her sanity. And once her fear reaches its peak, the explosion becomes inevitable. When the attack happens, it's not quiet. It's not subtle. It's not whispered behind closed doors. It is immediate and violent. Willow's rage pours out of her in ways she didn't even know she was capable of. One moment she's trembling, wide-eyed, cornered. The next, she's lunging. Grabbing whatever object is within reach, a vase, a lamp, a paperweight, it doesn't matter. What matters is that she strikes. She doesn't think. She reacts. And the moment Drew collapses in front of her, possibly unconscious, possibly worse, the full weight of what she's done crashes down. But by then, it's too late. This act is not a random slip. It is the culmination of everything Willow has suppressed for years. The years of being controlled, gaslit, lied to by those she trusted. The emotional abuse she endured from Shiloh. The confusion and betrayal of learning who Harmony truly was. The fragile bond with Nina that was built and broken over and over. The pressure of being the calm, kind-hearted girl who never fought back. All of it explodes in that one horrifying moment, and it changes everything. The consequences are immediate. Drew is rushed to the hospital, unconscious, with visible injuries. Medical staff scramble. The police are notified. Questions begin swirling faster than answers can be formed. Was it an accident? Was it a breakdown? Was it self-defense? Or was it a calculated act of desperation? Willow's hands are shaking, her thoughts racing, her breath shallow. She says she didn't mean to hurt him. She says she was scared. But in that moment, even she isn't sure what her real intention was. The lines are too blurred. She has crossed into territory that logic can't untangle. As the news spreads, Port Charles reacts with a mix of horror and disbelief. Those closest to Willow are forced to confront a truth they've ignored for too long. She is not okay. She hasn't been okay for a while. Carly is shaken. Nina is paralyzed. Michael is devastated. Even Liesl, usually composed and calculating, struggles to comprehend what could have driven Willow to such a violent act. And then there's Daisy, at the center of it all, too young to understand, yet deeply impacted by the instability unfolding around her. For Willow, the aftermath is a blur of interrogation, medical evaluations, and soul-crushing shame. She begins to question her own sanity. She replays the moment over and over, trying to find the second where she could have stopped herself. But the truth is, there was no pause. No breath. No hesitation. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. And now, she is left in the wake of a storm she created with her own hands. Legal consequences loom. The press catches wind of the incident. Speculation mounts. Whispers of commitment hearings, psychiatric evaluations, and custody reviews circulate like vultures over a battlefield. Some argue she needs treatment. Others argue she needs to be charged. But for Willow, none of it matters as much as the hollow echo of that moment, the sound of Drew hitting the ground, the weight of the object in her hand, the realization that she's not who she thought she was. What makes this even more tragic is that the attack, for all its brutality, came from a place of profound emotional distortion. Willow didn't act out of cruelty. She acted out of fear, fear of being exposed, of losing control, of losing her child. But the adjustment in her personality, the erosion of her restraint, the collapse of her emotional balance, has transformed her from victim to aggressor. And that shift is one Port Charles won't forget. The people around her are now divided. Some rally to her side, pleading for compassion, citing trauma and mental illness. Others demand justice, arguing that if the roles were reversed, no one would be asking for mercy. Michael is caught in the middle, torn between love and horror, unsure if the woman he vowed to protect is still the same person, or someone entirely different now. And Nina, now seeing reflections of her own obsession in Willow's breakdown, must decide whether to intervene or step back entirely. As for Drew, his future remains uncertain. Will he wake up? Will he remember what happened? Will he use the truth to destroy Willow completely, or will he twist it for leverage if he survives? That looming uncertainty only deepens Willow's torment. And it ensures that this story is far from over. This moment, this violent unraveling, is one of the most dramatic emotional adjustments General Hospital has dared to explore. It is not about good or bad. It is about what happens when trauma festers instead of heals, when fear replaces reason, and when love is corrupted by desperation. Willow, once a symbol of endurance and quiet strength, is now the embodiment of what happens when emotional pressure reaches its breaking point. And Port Charles will never be the same again. Neither will she. The unfolding tragedy surrounding Drew's critical condition after being shot by Willow has pushed Port Charles into a terrifying state of crisis. One that has escalated far beyond anything anyone could have imagined. What began as whispers of emotional instability and quiet concern has erupted into a full-blown nightmare. As Willow, once the image of calm resilience, now stands at the heart of a violent act that has left one man fighting for his life and an entire town grappling with the psychological destruction left in her wake. The shooting wasn't just a breakdown. It was the brutal culmination of an obsessive descent that has been building for months, masked by grief, masked by the pressure to forgive, masked by the impossible expectations placed on a woman still haunted by the wreckage of her past. But now that mask has shattered. And the true cost of that descent is bleeding across every corner of the canvas. Drew's body lies battered in a hospital bed, his fate uncertain. Machines beeping steadily as he remains unconscious, possibly brain damaged, possibly slipping further into a coma with each hour. What few understand is that the bullet that tore through his body was never just a weapon of physical violence. It was an eruption of psychological pain that had no outlet left. Willow, burdened by years of trauma, control, and emotional coercion, reached a threshold where reason no longer stood between her and destruction. And Drew, who had increasingly tried to use her secrets as leverage, who had stepped deeper into the shadows of manipulation, became the final trigger, both literally and figuratively. Now, as doctors scramble to keep Drew alive, the ripples of what happened are stretching wider than anyone could contain. Nina and Liesel, upon learning of the shooting, are completely shattered. They never expected this. They never imagined that the quiet girl they had once begged to accept them could unleash something so dark, so violent, so dangerously beyond redemption. Nina in particular is paralyzed by the enormity of the event, unable to reconcile the image of the daughter she fought so hard to love with the woman now capable of pulling a trigger in cold panic. And terrifying. The control she once fought against has now become the very thing she wields, twisted, corrupted, and sharpened into a weapon. Willow no longer trusts anyone. Begins to confront a truth she never wanted to believe, that the daughter she longed to claim has now become the embodiment of everything she once feared in herself, an unstable, emotionally fractured woman consumed by the need to control, to correct, to preserve a world she believes is slipping away. Meanwhile, as Drew hovers between life and death, the legal questions begin to stack up. Was this self-defense? Was it premeditated? Can trauma be used as a shield against the consequences of pulling a trigger? These are not just courtroom debates. They are moral questions now haunting everyone who ever told Willow she was strong, that she would be okay, that she could carry just a little bit more. Because now, it's clear, she couldn't. She didn't. And someone almost died because of it. This latest incident marks one of the darkest psychological adjustments seen in General Hospital in years. It is not merely a plot twist or a character development. It is the depiction of emotional decay brought to its inevitable, violent conclusion. And it forces every character who once stood by Willow to confront their own guilt, their own silence, their own refusal to see the signs. The obsession has taken hold fully now. Willow, no longer clinging to redemption or clarity, walks through Port Charles with a calm that unnerves even the most hardened residents. She is not shouting. She is not weeping. She is simply existing. Convinced she did what had to be done. That stillness, the void of remorse, is what terrifies Nina most. Because she sees herself in it. And she knows exactly what kind of damage that kind of stillness can cause. As Drew's condition continues to deteriorate, and the town spirals deeper into chaos, it becomes clear that this isn't just a story of violence, it's a story about what happens when emotional pressure, when obsession, when guilt and pain and control all collide in the fragile vessel of a woman once seen as gentle. And now, no one knows if she can be saved. Or if she even wants to be. Because for Willow, this might not be the end. It might be the beginning of something far darker. Jason never thought he would be forced to make the ultimate sacrifice for the brother who once betrayed him. The years of silence, mistrust, and pain between Jason and Drew had left a chasm that seemed irreparable. But when Jason stood outside the operating room at General Hospital, watching doctors fight to keep Drew alive after a near-fatal shooting, something within him shifted. The weight of old betrayals and buried grudges melted under the reality of human fragility. Drew was dying, and only Jason had the match to save him. Not through money or power or loyalty, but through his own body. A transplant, a donation of the one organ Drew now needed to survive. Jason. But that decision was only the beginning of a new nightmare. For Willow, everything had become unrecognizable. The truth about Drew, his manipulations, his control over her through Daisy, and the lingering fear that he would ruin what little peace she had left, had all snapped something inside her. In a confrontation that spiraled beyond anyone's control, her rage overcame restraint. The gun, meant to protect herself, went off in her hand, and Drew fell. There was blood, screams, and chaos. Now, she sat in a sterile room, alone, as the authorities debated her mental stability. As lawyers whispered about temporary insanity, and as Nina tried to shield her from the gathering storm. But no protection could cover the horror in her eyes. The knowledge that she might have killed a man who, no matter how vile his actions, was still Michael's uncle and Scout's father. Her guilt twisted into a silent scream. Liesel was frozen in disbelief. Inflicted it. But this was something else. She had once saved Willow's life with a bone marrow donation, an act of healing in a town known for blood and betrayal. Now, as she sat in the hallway outside Willow's room, she feared that nothing could stop the girl from collapsing entirely. Nina. She had become obsessed with Drew, not in a romantic way, but in the way trauma latches onto its abuser and never lets go. Michael visited Drew once, before the operation. Jason underwent evaluation. Physically, he was a match. But emotionally? Psychologically? That was another matter. No one knew the exact terms of what Jason would lose or gain from this surgery. It wasn't just tissue, it was the weight of history, of grudges, of years lost. To give Drew a second chance was to acknowledge that people can change. That people like Jason. Jason did it because he couldn't watch someone die when he had the power to stop it. Not anymore. Back in the shadows of the court system, Willow faced a different kind of fate. Legal experts began building a case around her mental state, citing emotional distress, postpartum trauma, and psychological manipulation. Carly fought behind the scenes to preserve her access to the children while ensuring that Willow wouldn't be permanently institutionalized. But the storm wasn't just legal, it was personal. Willow had become the center of a spiraling storm of blame. Ava whispered that she had always seen darkness in the girl's eyes. Valentine offered to handle the situation discreetly. But Michael? Michael stood at the edge of a cliff, unsure if he could save the woman he loved without losing himself in the process. Jason's surgery was successful, but the recovery was slow. He was weaker than he had ever been. And as he lay in his hospital bed, he wondered what Drew would say when he woke. Would there be gratitude? Or guilt? Or would Drew even survive long enough to answer? Meanwhile, Nina paced outside Willow's holding room. Torn between maternal instinct and the shattering realization that she might lose her daughter all over again. Liesel, ever the scientist, began researching new therapies, not just for physical trauma. But never like this. Willow had gone to war with her past, and it was dragging everyone into the fire. And through it all, the town held its breath. Because in the quiet spaces between surgeries and trials and whispered accusations, there was something darker brewing. A secret alliance between Sunny and Michael. Forged not out of trust but necessity. They had one common goal now, to ensure that Drew never harmed Willow again. They weren't waiting for the courts to decide. They were watching, planning, calculating. And if Drew ever woke up and dared to speak against Willow, dared to twist the narrative, they would bury him, this time not metaphorically. Sunny had made peace with being a softer man. But he also remembered what it meant to protect blood. And for all her sins, Willow was family. The final chapter had not yet been written, but the stage was set. Jason, the reluctant savior. Drew, the wounded manipulator. Willow, the shattered heroine on the brink of collapse. Nina, the desperate mother clawing her way toward forgiveness. And Sunny and Michael, two sides of the same coin. Willing to risk everything for vengeance disguised as justice. In Port Charles, nothing stayed buried. And in the silence between beeping monitors and courtroom gavel strikes, a single truth echoed louder than all the rest: redemption has a price, and sometimes, the ones who pay it are the ones least prepared to survive. Nina had always believed that love could fix what the world had broken, but as the shadows deepened around Willow, she began to understand that sometimes love demanded more than forgiveness or sacrifice. It demanded escape. 4 months. Felt a shift in her own soul. This wasn't about justice anymore. This was about survival. This was about taking Willow far away before the system crushed what little spirit she had left. The decision didn't come all at once. It grew slowly, like a vine wrapping itself around Nina's heart, fed by each courtroom glare, every judgmental glance from Carly, every whispered warning from Sunny. They were watching Willow fail, some with concern, others with silent condemnation. Even Michael, though visibly torn, had begun to distance himself. Afraid for their children, afraid of Willow's instability, afraid of what the headlines were saying. Nina saw it all. She watched as Willow crumbled beneath the weight of her own actions, the confrontation with Drew, the weapon she had wielded in fear and desperation, the explosion of pain that followed. Though Drew had survived, barely clinging to life in the hospital, the consequences were circling Willow like vultures. And so Nina began to plan. She told no one, not even Liesel, not even Maxie. She reached out to contacts from the past, discreet, dangerous people who owed her favors from her days entrenched in power plays with Valentine, Ava, and even Sunny himself. She obtained fake identities, secured a route through back roads and private airstrips, paid in cash and silence. But most of all, she prepared Willow, who was increasingly detached from reality. The young woman would cry one moment and laugh the next, calling out for Wiley, asking if Drew was alive, forgetting what day it was. She was scared, volatile, and unpredictable. But she trusted Nina. Maybe the only person left she still trusted. In a dim motel room 2 states away, Nina held Willow as she whispered, "Will they come for me?" And Nina answered with a calm she did not feel, "No. Baby. You're safe now." But safety was a lie. Every hour away from Port Charles only deepened the magnitude of what she had done. She had abducted an adult woman who was under investigation for attempted murder. She had obstructed justice. She had taken her daughter from her children. And yet, she convinced herself it was the only way. Because the alternative, leaving Willow behind to be locked up, to lose custody, to be declared mentally unfit, was unbearable. Meanwhile, back in Port Charles, chaos unfurled. Liesl discovered Nina's empty penthouse and found the burner phone still buzzing with cryptic texts from untraceable numbers. Maxie noticed Willow hadn't shown up for her court-mandated therapy session. Sonny, who had been suspicious for weeks, finally confronted Michael about how far Willow had fallen and what role Drew's silence was playing. And Carly, always ready to accuse, began whispering to the press that Nina had snapped again, dragging her daughter into yet another scandal. The police issued a statewide alert. Questions filled the air. Was Willow a danger to herself? Was Nina manipulating her? Would they hurt someone else if cornered? The real answer was more complicated than any of them imagined. Willow wasn't a criminal. She was a broken woman, drowning in a tide of trauma she no longer understood. And Nina, once painted as a villain, then a savior, then something in between, had crossed a line so blurred by maternal instinct that even she could no longer see it clearly. In the motel room, she told Willow stories about starting over, about farms in Canada and ocean towns in Portugal, about peace and freedom and quiet. But every time she looked at her daughter, pale and trembling beneath borrowed blankets, Nina wondered if this peace she sought was just another lie. And still, they ran. The further they traveled, the more Nina felt the world collapsing behind them. GH released a new update. Drew had emerged from his coma and had reportedly told Jason and Elizabeth that he remembered everything. He remembered the look on Willow's face. He remembered the pain. And though he hadn't yet pressed charges, the DA was already moving forward. Nina knew time was running out. Jason would come for them. Liesl would come. Maybe even Sonny. The thought of facing Sonny made her chest tighten. She had once loved that man. Now, she feared he would never forgive her. Not for this. Willow, too, was changing. The longer she remained in hiding, the less she resembled the mother she had once been. She stopped asking about Wiley. She stopped brushing her hair. She spoke in riddles, sometimes mumbling about Shiloh, Harmony, even Nellie. Nina recognized the signs. Her daughter was slipping into psychosis. And the very escape meant to save her might be the thing ensuring her complete collapse. But there was no turning back. Nina could not return her to the life that had broken her. In a final act of desperation, Nina contacted Liesl and begged for help, not as an accomplice, but as a doctor. Liesl agreed to meet them, swearing to keep it quiet. The reunion was brief and heartbreaking. Liesl wept at the sight of her granddaughter so unwell. She didn't scream, didn't lecture, didn't threaten. She simply examined Willow, gave Nina advice, and swore she would delay any alerts for at least another day. But she warned Nina, the end was coming. They could not run forever. And deep down, Nina knew it. She knew that this act of maternal obsession would end in ruin. But she didn't care. Because for the first time in her life, she had put her daughter first, even if it cost her everything. Even if it meant prison. Even if it meant watching Willow fade into someone she couldn't recognize. Even if it meant saying goodbye on her own terms. Because this wasn't about redemption anymore. It wasn't about love. It was about obsession, one that had consumed them both and would not let go until the final crash came.